Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Sri Banerjee. I'm the chair. I'm Bobbi Johnson's chair. Here with us also is committee member Dr. Tom O'Grady. And today is the 10th of April. And currently the time is 4:32 p.m. Eastern Time. Um, Bobby's about to present on type 2 diabetes as a risk factor for the development of cognitive dysfunction in U.S. adults. Bobby, so whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. So like Dr. Sri Banerjee said, the title of the dissertation, the final oral defense, is type 2 diabetes as a risk factor for the development of cognitive dysfunction in U.S. adults. First of all, I want to start off by saying thank you, Dr. Banerjee, and also thank you, Dr. O'Grady, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen to my defense. I greatly appreciate this. And now it's time to move forward with the presentation. Let's see. Okay. So first, we're going to start off with the summary of proposal. Well, let's identify the gap in the literature. Previous literature findings have shown evidence of the association between elevated hemoglobin A1C levels and cognitive dysfunction. However, there has been literature which denotes that such an association exists. With such ambiguity, this would be recognized as the gap in the literature. So, what is the point? Why are we even here? Now, I want to take a look into the purpose of the study. And the purpose of the study will focus on evaluating if self-reported healthcare diagnosed diabetes has any association with cognitive dysfunction in participants living with type 2 diabetes. Now, with regard to the method and design of the study, I utilize a quantitative cross-sectional research design with a secondary data analysis. The data set was obtained from the NHANES website, which is in association with the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, also known as the CDC. The data set obtained was from the 2017 to March 2020 pre-pandemic files. A logistic regression analysis was applied using SPS software. And now we will go into the research questions. The research question, wait a minute, am I on the right slide? Yes, I am. Sorry. The research question RQ1 asks, is there an association between cognitive dysfunction and diabetes after controlling for age, sex, poverty to income ratio, and ethnicity? Research question 2 asks, does race modify the effects of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio? Research question 3 asks, does sex modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio? And now we will go on to the hypothesis. For the hypothesis, in reference to research question 1, the null hypothesis states there is no association between cognitive dysfunction and diabetes after controlling for age, sex, poverty, income ratio, and ethnicity. The alternative states there is an association between cognitive dysfunction and diabetes after controlling for age, sex, poverty, income ratio, and ethnicity. With research question 2, the null hypothesis states race does not modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio. The alternative states race does modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio. Research question 3 hypothesis, the null hypothesis states sex does not modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio. The alternative states Sex does modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio. Now, when we take a look into the measurement of the variables, here I have 4 different variables that will be measured, that was measured for the study. The variables encompass sex, age, race, and poverty income ratio. And I will go through each one. First, I will start with sex. And Haynes administered a survey to each of its participants. With regard to this, there were trained professionals who conducted the survey through the use of a computer assisted personal interview, also known as CAPI. The questionnaire asked participants if they identified themselves as either a male or female. Each of the participants' responses received a code number. If the participants identified themselves as male, that will be coded as 1. And if the participants identified, oh, I'm sorry, hold on. And if the participants identified themselves as female, then the code would be 2. Secondly, we would take a look into age. Again, Haynes employed the CAPI system to ask participants their age at the time of screening. Participants who were 60 to 79 years of age received a code pertaining to their own respective age. Thirdly was race. With CAPI, the participants were asked to identify themselves as either non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, Hispanic, or other. Fourth is the poverty income ratio. And Haynes would ask participants of their total annual household income. And from that, they would take that total and divide it by the poverty guidelines specific to the survey year. This information was found on the Department of Health and Human Services website, also known as HHS. The ratio numbers had their own code, just like for the variable age had its own code as well. And we will look into the participants and sample size. The type of data being used was secondary data. The secondary data set was obtained from NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. NHANES is part of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It is responsible for producing vital and health statistics for the nation. The sample population consisted of adults who were between 60 to 69 years of age. The inclusion criteria consisted of participants who had type 2 diabetes and in a non-institutionalized population. Now, these participants in these non-institutionalized populations are those that were not inmate, well, they were not inmates of an institution, such as a mental facility and homes for the elderly. The exclusion criteria consisted of participants who did not receive a diabetes prognosis and living in an institutionalized population. Now we will go into the power calculation. For the power calculation, I use a z-test, logistic regression statistical test. The power analysis was the a priori compute sample size given the alpha, power, and effect size. For the input parameters, that encompass the two-tailed normal distribution. The odds ratio was at 1.4. The alpha error probability was at 0.05, and the power was at 0.95. The output parameter had a sample size of 726 participants. And the next slide, we will go into the results, starting with RQ1 or research question 1, which states, is there an association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, poverty income ratio, and ethnicity? Now, below you will see a chart, and this chart provides the answer to research question 1. As we look at the chart, we see to the far left, the odds ratio. Next to that, to the right of it, is the 95% confidence interval. And last, we see the p-value, which validates the statistical significance of the findings. So in regard to this, I can be 95% sure the true odds ratio is between 1.321 and 2.333 because the estimated middle value is 1.756. Now, this is where the p-value, the significance comes into play. If the p-value is at least at 5% or below, then you can reject the null hypothesis. So since the p-value in this case is 0.001, we can conclude that in general, there is an association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, poverty income ratio, and ethnicity. Next, we will look into research question 2. And research question 2 asks, does race modify the effects of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio? Now below you will see another chart. And this chart provides the answer to research question 2. To the far left is the variable race. To the right of it is the odds ratio. Next to that is the 95% confidence interval. And last is the p-value. Now, since race is being modified for this particular question, I have broken down the answer specific to or curtailed to the race that each participant identified themselves as. Now, let's start with the non-Hispanic white population. Now, from this chart, I could be 95% confident that the true odds ratio lies between 1.283 and 2.796. The odds ratio or the middle value is at 1.894. So with this, since the p-value is at since the p-value is at 0.003, I can reject the null hypothesis for this particular group. In essence, we can conclude that race does modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio for the non-Hispanic white population. In this case, the p-value would be statistically significant. Now for the non-Hispanic Black population, I can be 95% confident that the true odds ratio is between 0.585 and 2.963 with the estimated middle value at 1.316. Now, since the p-value is at 0.482, we can conclude that race does not modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, and poverty income ratio for the non-Hispanic Black population. In this case, the p-value would be statistically insignificant. For the Hispanic population, I can be 95% sure that the true odds ratio is between 0.496 and 3.268, with the estimated middle value at 1.273. Since the p-value is at 0.593, we can conclude that race does not modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, poverty income ratio for the Hispanic population. In this case, the p-value would be statistically insignificant. And lastly is the group identified as other. I could be 95% confident that the true odds ratio is between 1.028 and 6.798 with an estimated middle value at 2.644. Since the p-value is at 0.044, we can conclude that race does modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age, sex, poverty income ratio for the population identified as other. In this case, the p-value would be statistically significant. And last but not least, research question 3 asks, does sex modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio. Now below you will see a chart again, which provides the answer to RQ3 or research question 3. To the far left, we have the variable gender, and to the right of it is the odds ratio. Next to that is the 95% confidence interval, and lastly is the p-value. Now, since sex is being modified in this particular question, I have broken down the answer specific to each gender, which would be the male and the female, or the men or the women. For the men, I am 95% confident the true odds ratio is between 1.251 and 3.491, with the estimated middle value at 2.090. Since the p-value is at 0.008, we can conclude that sex does modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio. In this case, the p-value will be statistically significant. For the women, I am 95% confident that the true odds ratio is between 0.984 and 2.875, with an estimated middle value at 1.682. Now, since the p-value in this case is at 0.057, we can conclude that sex does not modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction after controlling for age and poverty income ratio. In this case, the p-value would be statistically insignificant. All right, now we get into how do the findings relate to the literature. The results have confirmed previous literature findings regarding the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction. The study has also extended previous literature findings by incorporating additional covariates such as age, sex, ethnicity, and poverty income ratio. Now, with race, I assessed if various ethnic groups can modify the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction while controlling for other covariates. And with gender, I assessed if the male or female population can alter the effects of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction when controlling for other covariates as well. All right, how do the findings relate to the conceptual theoretical framework? Now, with self-determination theory, the theory focuses on how motivated a participant or individual is. They could be intrinsically motivated, which is through autonomy, extrinsically motivated, which would be influenced by other things or peers, or amotivation, which is just a lack of motivation in total. And so for the research findings, I found in my study that there is an association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction. With cognitive dysfunction being my dependent variable and diabetes being the independent variable, cognitive dysfunction is reliable upon how somebody manages their own diabetes, which helps to induce the self-determination theory, which was applied for the study. And then with that, I also look into the race and how that modifies the effect of the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction, along with gender. Limitations of the study. Unfortunately, there were some limitations to the study. We're going to start off with the recall bias. Now, each of the participants were asked a series of questions, all in a single time frame. Now, with that, they have to think in their mind of how they're going to respond to the questions asked. There's not an actual validity of, there's not a timestamp of when the event or when something took place. They're only just recalling in their mind how something took place and when something took place. The second limitation would be the multi-stage probability sampling. And with that, The multi-stage probability sampling is a good sampling method to use. However, from a particular group that we're studying, like for instance, the non-Hispanic white population, we can make, we can have findings on that, but can we apply it to the whole population in general? No, we cannot actually do that. Recommendations for future research. Um, I believe that a longitudinal study needs to be conducted. It could be like 3, 5 year study, or even more, or even longer. It can also implement a survey where they actually assess how determined participants are, whether if it's extrinsically, intrinsically, or just a lack of motivation, right? Because with managing diabetes, there has to be some type of motivation, whether if it's there or not. And then also we can look into race and see how that impacts as well as gender. We can look into the A1C levels and see if there's any cognitive changes along the way. And also with the mechanisms, we find that there are 3 different mechanisms that exacerbate cognitive development, which is the insulin resistant syndrome, hyperglycemia, and the interruption of insulin homeostasis in the brain. Now, we can also take a look into in relation to each race and even gender. It could be that for the non Hispanic white population, the insulin resistant syndrome is found more common in them than it is for the non Hispanic Black, and the development of cognitive dysfunction. Okay, social change implications. So it can start off like this. The researcher conducts its study, collects the data, has its findings that they can disseminate. And as far as reaching out to the medical professionals and even speaking at conferences, different seminars, they can disseminate this information. And then what the healthcare or medical professionals can do with the information is that they can educate their own patients, and they can also provide resources to those patients. Well, then in return, the patients will be able to disseminate the findings or be able to relate the message to their own family members, and so and also their friends as well. Conclusions. Previous literature findings, we see that there is an association between the hemoglobin A1C levels and cognitive dysfunction. In my study, we find that there is an association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction. And also with that, I extend in the literature by looking into the different racial groups, such as the non-Hispanic whites, the non-Hispanic blacks, the Hispanics, and those identifying themselves as other. And then I also look into the different sex, the gender, seeing how the male population or the female population affect the association between diabetes and cognitive dysfunction. Whew. Okay. The acknowledgments. I want to say thank you to Dr. Banerjee for all of your input, for being patient, for being allowing your students to be able to express themselves, and not only that, you give your input as well. Um, I thank you for your guidance throughout this whole process, because this process can be very grueling. But I thank you for your guidance, your patience. Um, it means so much, and it made this process even better for me, even though I've had my challenges from time to time. I feel like I could have not been paired with a better chair. So I thank you so much. And Dr. O'Grady, I want to thank you, even though you're the committee member and not the chair. I want to thank you for your input. I really appreciate it. And then lastly, I do want to thank the form and style editor, Dr. Coggle. I hope I'm saying her name correctly, because I know that is a task, reading the beginning of somebody's dissertation all the way to the end. And lastly, I want to say, I'll read this little picture here. It says, it is not happy people who are thankful. It is thankful people who are happy. And these are my references. And this concludes the presentation. Now I will open the floor for additional comments or questions.
Bobbi, I want to start by saying this was a great presentation. Then I'll first thing Dr. O'Grady will ask his questions, and then I'll ask mine.
Sure. So
Okay.
yeah, I also want to reiterate it was a really interesting project. It was great to hear you talk about it. I enjoyed reading it as I was getting pieces of it. So good work. And I don't have any like really hard questions or anything. So one thing I do want to say is this is really cool because there's a lot happening with Alzheimer's disease right now. I don't know how much you follow that world, but in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been some pharmaceutical advances, and that's exciting. But we also need to have the discussion about how the managing other co-occurring chronic diseases can help with outcomes related to this. So I think your work here fits nicely with what's going on with it, and it's cool that it's happening at the same time as some of this. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I was thinking here about a couple of the things. So, one of the things that you mentioned was the A1C levels. Have you found, like, is there a way for future studies to pick up where you left off? Is there some sort of data resource that you think could be utilized to look more closely at the A1C aspect of this?
Yes. I was actually, and on one of my slides, I was talking about for future research purposes, maybe that they can conduct a longitudinal study looking at the A1Cs. I didn't start off with the A1Cs at first, but it would be great if they did look at the A1Cs and then compare it to how motivated individuals are in managing their diabetes, as long as split, as well as looking into the different racial groups and how it impacts, um see how it looks at the non-Hispanic whites versus the non-Hispanic blacks versus Hispanic and those in the other category. They don't necessarily have to have those four specific categories. They could create more categories, but it would be beneficial to look into that.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of back on so I had done cancer work when I was doing my PhD, but I utilized the AARP diet and health study, and I was wondering if that might have some of the stuff that you're looking at. I couldn't remember specifically, but it just got my mind spinning a little bit about potential data
Right.
sources that could be used as follow up. I was also thinking about with the effect modification aspect, in different, so like for men, to start, I was wondering there if that was behavioral, like that would be a good place to look, because there's some evidence that men are less likely to go see their physicians, get treated, do health screenings.
Right.
And this is clear, if you're talking to them about, well, this can compound your risk down the road, that definitely ties in with your the theory that you were talking about. So I think that's a good place potentially to get that motivational aspect in, like the public health
Right.
messaging.
Right.
And then with the race, that was interesting too. It didn't seem easily explainable on the surface level, and I was wondering there if you had looked at, with Alzheimer's disease, there's a really strong association between the ApoA4 gene and outcomes. So I was wondering if that was more prevalent in specific race or ethnicity groups, and that might be something to look at too that could help you explain some of the findings that you're seeing.
Right. Yeah, that would be great to as far as with future research purposes. Yes, that would definitely be impactful. Yes.
Well, and that's that was kind of all I had, just some general comments and everything, but great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. O'Grady. That was very insightful. you were talking about A1C, and that's some of the discussions we had, over email. And also you brought up the biological ApoE, and I agree. What Dr. O'Grady was saying, there's a lot of research and literature that is coming up recently where they're looking at ApoE. Actually, I had a presentation at APHA last November where I presented on African Americans with Alzheimer's disease. And there were some variations with ApoE and other things. So that's something nice to look at. I mean, something that might be biologically. You did give another biological explanation in there, and you also provided a lot of elaboration of social factors. And I think we have to emphasize that. And as we move along, social determinants of health, is at the center of a lot of things. And as long as we're applying that, that's one of the key elements of public health. So that's a take-home message here. So you did mention about the non-institutionalized population. Can you go over, what groups are considered institutionalized?
Okay, so the not institutionalized, they're just people that are housed in nursing homes. Those are serving in the military and in mental institutions. Now for the institutionalized, they'll be everybody with the exception of those that I just listed.
Great, great. Thank you, Bobby. The other question I had, in terms of complex samples, how difficult was that to apply? I know a lot of students have difficulties. Was that something that was easy to apply, or were there things that
No,
you
at
need to
first
learn?
it was
Hmm?
yeah, at first it was difficult to do that.
Mhm, mhm,
I'm not gonna lie to you, but
mhm,
it was very easy after I got the hang of it. It was definitely easy to do.
mhm, mhm. All right. Uh, and then dissemination. What types of outlets do you plan on? Do you think you will be spreading the message on? This is some great findings.
Right. Well, you know what? Because
Mhm,
I work with an endocrinologist at the University of Florida, I can actually, she's actually the chair of endocrinology. So I could run this by her.
mhm,
And since she's doing study also on diabetes, this will be very impactful for her to be able to get this information. And then maybe she can just sound the alarm to the rest of the physicians and be like, hey,
mhm,
like we have something going here with Bobby's
mhm,
research. Let's see
mhm.
what else we can find out.
No, that's a great answer, Bobby. And of course, there's APHA and a lot of conferences that go on. Even Walden has their journals, and a lot of places. Just look around, and of course, you can contact me, and I'm sure Dr. O'Grady wouldn't mind, in a publication in the future. So this is some really great work, and Bobby. I mean, usually students, don't get positive findings. When I mean, be able to reject the null. A lot of students, kind of go through and they have negative findings. You're one of a kind there. Um, uh, uh, um, yeah, so that was all the questions I had. So Dr. O'Grady, what is your thought on this in terms of letting her go or move forward, or are there any changes that you?
No, 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 I think positive. I approve that. I think you did a great job, and I agree. I think this is great that you found some positive findings. So I was glad that you asked about dissemination. I do hope that you'll consider trying to get this published in some form. I think that'll be very helpful for your career, whatever you think about moving forward, obviously. So yeah, great job. I think you should pass.
Thank
No,
you.
I agree. I completely agree with Dr. O'Grady. Has been a tremendous effort. I've seen you grow throughout the years, and I'm really proud. This is a really great momentous occasion for me. And thank you for being always there and taking my comments and everything. Uh, so congratulations,
Well,
Dr. Johnson.
thank you.
How
Thank
does that
you.
sound?
I don't mean to be crying. I'm sorry.
No,
It's
no, no,
good.
no.
It's perfectly fine to be happy. It should be.
Mhm, mhm.
It's just
Thank
I'm
you.
sure it's a weight off your shoulders too. So
Yes.
It is. It is. And plus, it's been a lot trying to do my dissertation because I went from my sister having cancer and it was some family members that were sick. And it was just hard going through this process, but I was just trying to stick with it.
Mhm,
But no, I thank you.
mhm, mhm. All right. Well, you have to go celebrate now.
yeah,
That's
definitely.
I
That's the
am.
first
tell your
order of
family
business.
members. Your support system. Thank them. Just you've been great.
Go out to dinner or
Thank you.
something. Do so. Yeah, exactly. Do something to
I'm
celebrate.
gonna need a drink after
Mhm.
this.
Right.
Thank you guys so much.
Mhm, mhm. Well, at this point, if there's nothing more, Bobby, I'm gonna go ahead and approve. Take 24 hours and a couple days maybe if you need, and then you can go ahead and submit your final copy, and then Dr. O'Grady and me will be approving, and then once approved, you're ready to go to CAO.
Okay. Thank
Mhm,
you so
mhm.
much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. You guys have a great day.
You too.
You as well,
All right.
Congratulations again.
uh,
Thank you.
Dr. O'Grady.